I gave everything to my family, my time, my money, my heart. For years, I believed their words. Family comes first. But one phone call changed everything. My parents sold the lake house I had worked a decade to buy just to fund my sister's extravagant $150,000 wedding. And at the celebration, while glasses clinked and laughter filled the room, they looked at me and sneered, "Thanks for the wedding present." My smile never wavered, because what they didn't know was that I had been preparing for this moment, and with 3 words, their entire world would collapse. I used to believe that my devotion to my family was the very thing that made me valuable. Growing up, I learned to swallow my needs, to place theirs above mine, to stretch myself thin until nothing was left. I thought that was love. I thought that was loyalty. Every phone call in the middle of the night, every demand that came without warning, I treated like an honor rather than a burden. There were nights when the phone rang at 2 in the morning, my mother's voice trembling with urgency. "Emily, I can't sleep. Your father and I are fighting again. Can you come over?" And I would drag myself out of bed, put on my coat, and drive across town, even though I had work in the morning. I'd sit on their couch, listening to their arguments, playing mediator while they drained me of every ounce of emotional strength. I told myself this was what good daughters did. This was family. Other times, it wasn't about emotions at all. It was money. "Emily, your sister needs a new laptop for school. You're doing well, aren't you? Can't you help?" Or, "The car broke down and we don't have the savings. Can you cover this just until next month?" Just until next month became every month. My paycheck disappeared into a black hole, my own dreams pushed aside so that theirs could thrive. And still, I felt guilty if I hesitated. The house by the lake was supposed to be my one piece of freedom. After years of saving, of saying no to vacations, of working weekends, I finally signed the papers. It wasn't a mansion, but it was mine. The water reflected the sky in a way that made me feel like the world could still be peaceful. Every time I unlocked the door, I reminded myself that sacrifices had meaning, that this place proved I wasn't just a vessel for my family's needs. I thought it was safe. Yet even as I sat by the water, sipping coffee in the quiet mornings, my phone never stopped ringing. My parents always found ways to pull me back. My sister, radiant and entitled, had grown used to my generosity. She didn't ask, she demanded, "Emily, can you transfer me some money? The wedding planner said the deposit is due this week." And when I hesitated, my mother's voice slid into the conversation, sharp and coated with guilt. "You know family is everything. Your sister deserves the best. She's only getting married once." Their words always carried the same weight. Family comes first. And I wanted so badly to believe it. Maybe that's why I ignored the warning signs. The way my father would avoid answering questions about finances. The way my mother's eyes shifted whenever the topic of inheritance came up. The way my sister would whisper behind my back, laughing at how gullible I was. Gaslighting became the language of our household. When I asked about missing money, they said I was paranoid. When I questioned why my contributions were never acknowledged, they called me selfish. "You're imagining things," my father would insist, his tone final, as though my memory couldn't be trusted. And I wanted to trust them. So I swallowed the doubt and carried on, pretending that love was enough to excuse betrayal. But betrayal doesn't vanish, it festers. I started noticing little cracks in the perfect picture. At the bank, a clerk mentioned documents related to my lake house that I hadn't signed. My heart skipped, but I brushed it off as a clerical error. At dinner, my sister joked about how expensive weddings were, and winked at my parents as if they shared a private joke. I laughed nervously, ignoring the knot in my stomach. And then came the night when I couldn't ignore it anymore. I was sorting through my papers when I found that the original deed to my house was missing. My folder, once neat and complete, had a gap where it mattered most. My chest tightened as I searched every drawer, every box. It wasn't there. My pulse hammered in my ears. I sat back on the floor, papers scattered around me like fallen leaves. My hands trembled as I realized that something was very, very wrong. The unease that had been whispering at the back of my mind was now screaming. This wasn't just careless bookkeeping. This was deliberate. And as I stared at the empty space in my folder, I couldn't shake the feeling that everything I thought I knew about my family was about to unravel. I didn't know it then, but losing that piece of paper was only the beginning. The truth waiting for me was far darker than I could imagine. This wasn't the peak of betrayal. It was only the opening act of a performance they had been staging for years. The bank smelled of polished wood and disinfectant, the kind of sterile calm that usually reassured me. Not that day. My palms were clammy as I handed the teller my ID and asked for a copy of my mortgage documents. I told myself it was routine, just to confirm everything was fine. The clerk clicked away at her keyboard, eyes narrowing slightly as if something unexpected had appeared on the screen. She excused herself and disappeared into the back. My chest tightened with every second she was gone. When she returned, she was carrying a folder. She slid it across the desk, her expression carefully neutral. "Miss Carson, according to our records, this property has already been sold. The transaction was finalized 3 weeks ago." Her words hit me like a blow to the chest. My ears rang, drowning out the bustle of the bank. I fumbled for the folder, scanning the pages in disbelief. My signature was there, my handwriting, my name, but I hadn't signed anything. The date, the ink, the notary stamp, all perfectly in place. It was a flawless forgery. I could barely hear myself whisper, "This isn't possible." The clerk's eyes flickered with sympathy. "I'm afraid the documents are legally binding. The house is no longer in your possession." My legs felt weak, as though the ground itself had given way beneath me. That house wasn't just property. It was my proof that I had survived years of sacrifice, my sanctuary, my one tangible piece of freedom. And now it was gone, sold out from under me by the very people I had trusted most. My parents had forged my name, taken what was mine, and erased me from my own life. I stumbled out of the bank, clutching the papers like they might burn through my hands. The streets blurred. My heart pounded in my chest, so loud I could barely think. I leaned against a lamppost, gasping for air, the betrayal sinking deeper with every breath. But nothing could prepare me for what came next. Days later, I was invited to a family gathering, an engagement dinner for my sister. Against my better judgment, I went. I told myself I needed answers. I told myself they owed me an explanation. Deep down, maybe I still hoped they would deny it, that somehow this nightmare was a mistake. The restaurant glowed with warm lights, laughter bouncing off the walls. My sister sat in the center, dressed in designer silk, glowing with smug pride. My parents flanked her, beaming like they had just won the lottery. And maybe they had, off the back of my sacrifice. When the champagne glasses were filled, my father stood, raising his drink. "To family," he said, smiling broadly. Then my sister leaned across the table, her voice dripping with delight. "And to Emily, thank you for the wedding present." The table erupted in laughter. My parents clinked their glasses together, joining in the cruel joke. I froze, the words slicing into me like knives. A cold smile curved my lips, but inside I felt myself shatter. My sanctuary, my safety, reduced to a punchline in their celebration. I searched the room for someone, anyone, who might see the cruelty in what had just been said. My eyes landed on Daniel, my boyfriend of 3 years, the man who had held my hand through sleepless nights. Surely he would defend me. Surely he would stand up. But when I met his gaze, he smirked and lifted his glass along with them. "Come on, Em," he said lightly. "It's just a joke. Don't be so serious. It's for your sister's big day." My stomach twisted. His words sealed the betrayal, not just from my blood, but from the person I thought I could build a future with. In that instant, I realized I was truly alone at that table, surrounded by people I had sacrificed for, people who saw me as nothing more than a resource to exploit, a fool to laugh at. The laughter blurred into static. I sat rigid, my face an unreadable mask, though inside a storm was rising. My pulse steadied, my tears retreated, and something colder, sharper, began to take root. I smiled faintly, raising my glass like nothing was wrong. But in that moment, something inside me shifted forever. Because I knew then that they had underestimated me. They thought I was broken, powerless, humiliated. They thought I would keep playing the role of the dutiful daughter, the loyal sister, the accommodating girlfriend. They were wrong. I swallowed the champagne, my eyes glinting under the dim lights, and let the laughter wash over me. And as I sat there, invisible in plain sight, I made a silent promise. From this moment on, I was no longer their victim. The night after the engagement dinner, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. Every laugh, every mocking word, replayed in my head like a broken record. My chest ached, but the tears wouldn't come anymore. Something else had taken their place, a cold, steady determination. If my family wanted to play games, I would play smarter. I wasn't going to scream or beg. I was going to gather the kind of truth that couldn't be denied. The next morning, I bought a small digital recorder and slipped it into my purse. Every phone call, every conversation, I captured. At first, it felt strange, like I was crossing some invisible line. But then I remembered my father's smug voice telling me I was imagining things. If they wanted to gaslight me, I would shine a light so bright it would burn them. I reached out to a lawyer recommended by a colleague. She was sharp, no nonsense, the kind of woman who didn't flinch at family betrayals. When I slid the forged documents across her desk, she studied them in silence before meeting my eyes. "This is fraud," she said flatly, "and whoever did this could face serious consequences." Her words were oxygen. Finally, I wasn't crazy. I wasn't overreacting. What they had done was illegal. She helped me pull property records, bank statements, and transaction histories. That's when another piece of the puzzle surfaced. Large cash withdrawals made by my father, money that lined up perfectly with the times he had begged me for emergency help. My stomach turned when I saw the notes, casino transfers, gambling debts. The money I thought had gone toward helping the family had been feeding his addiction. I felt sick, but beneath the nausea was clarity. They hadn't just stolen my house. They had been stealing from me for years, laughing while I bled myself dry. But if betrayal had taught me anything, it was patience. I didn't confront them. I filed every statement, recorded every call, building a fortress of evidence. The pain was still there, but it no longer consumed me. It sharpened me, honed me into something unrecognizable, even to myself. Still, there was something nagging at me, something I hadn't uncovered yet. I could feel it, like a splinter under my skin. A truth lurking just out of sight. And I knew when it came to light, it would cut deeper than anything else. While I prepared, I didn't do it alone. My best friend Claire, who had watched my family's cruelty from the sidelines for years, stepped in. She helped me organize files, coached me through sleepless nights, reminded me that my worth wasn't defined by blood. Through her, I met a financial advisor who traced money trails I never would have found alone. Piece by piece, they revealed the skeletons my family had hidden. Then came the most unexpected ally, Aunt Margaret, my mother's quiet sister, a woman who had always kept to herself, called me one afternoon. Her voice was hesitant, but her words carried weight. "Emily, I've seen what they've been doing. You deserve to know the truth." She forwarded emails, old letters, and even a copy of a group chat she had been accidentally added to. When I opened it, my hands shook. The messages weren't from strangers. They were from my own family. Jokes about how easily I handed over money, plans to keep me in the dark about the wedding, and at the center of it all, my mother. She wasn't just complicit. She was the one pulling the strings. "I told you we need to leave Emily out of the will," one message from her read. "She's too naive. She'll just waste what we give her. Better to secure everything for her sister's future." The words blurred as I stared at the screen, my breath caught in my throat. All this time, I had thought my father's recklessness or my sister's entitlement were the biggest threats. But it was my mother, the person who had called me at 2 a.m. begging for comfort, the one I believed needed me most, who had orchestrated my erasure. The betrayal sank deeper than any knife. Yet even as my chest ached, something inside me hardened further. This wasn't negligence. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was deliberate, calculated. I closed the laptop, my reflection catching in the darkened screen. My eyes no longer looked broken. They looked sharp, unflinching. The warmth I once clung to was gone, replaced with a quiet fire. This was no longer about surviving their cruelty. This was war. The wedding was everything my sister had ever wanted. Chandeliers dripping with crystals, tables drowning in flowers, a ballroom that glowed gold under 1,000 lights. Guests murmured in awe as they arrived, marveling at the sheer extravagance. My parents strutted through the crowd like royalty, their smiles wide, their voices thick with pride. For them, this was not just a wedding. It was their triumph, paid for with the ruin of my dreams. I moved quietly, unnoticed in the sea of silks and tuxedos. My face was calm, my smile polite, but inside, my pulse thrummed like a war drum. For weeks, I had planned this moment down to the second. Every detail, every file, every recording, it was all ready. Tonight, they would finally face the truth. The ceremony passed in a haze, vows spoken, applause thundering, champagne flowing. As the reception began, the DJ called for attention. Before we move to the first dance, we have a very special video, words of love and blessings from family. My sister's face lit up, expecting a montage of warm wishes. My parents leaned forward, smug with anticipation. The lights dimmed, the screen flickered to life, and my voice filled the hall. At first, it was gentle, clips of me smiling, congratulating, raising a glass. But then the recording shifted. The guests leaned closer, confused, as my father's voice came through. "We'll just forge her signature. She's too naive to notice." Laughter followed, my mother's laughter. "Selling the house will cover the wedding. She'll never dare confront us." The room fell silent. Every word echoed through the speakers, undeniable, damning. The image froze on my parents' faces, captured mid-smirk, while whispers rippled through the crowd. Gasps, sharp intakes of breath, shocked glances darting from the screen to the guilty parties seated at the head table. My mother's hand flew to her mouth, pale beneath the chandelier light. My father stood abruptly, shouting, "That's taken out of context!" His voice cracked, desperate, but no one was listening. My sister's groom recoiled, his eyes wide with disbelief. The fairy tale wedding was crumbling, and I stood there, calm amidst the wreckage. I raised my glass, smiling as though offering a toast. Inside, my chest felt lighter than it had in years. For once, I wasn't the one silenced, they were. But this was only the first layer. Even as chaos erupted, servers whispering, guests murmuring, I knew the real blow had yet to land. I had already sent complete files, recordings, documents, bank statements to my lawyer. At that very moment, she was forwarding them to local authorities, to financial regulators, even to a journalist who had been waiting for the story. Within hours, their betrayal would be more than just family gossip. It would be public record. The ripple effect began almost instantly. Phones buzzed across the room. A cousin checked his messages, then looked up at me, startled. An uncle's face paled as he read an email forwarded to the family. My parents were still scrambling to deny everything when the first guest stood and walked out, disgust written across her face. Others followed, murmuring words like fraud and forgery. My sister's groom backed away from her, his family whispering furiously. "You knew about this?" he demanded, his voice carrying across the stunned silence. My sister sputtered, reaching for him, but he shook her off. I slipped from my seat, weaving through the stunned crowd. My steps were steady, my breath calm. I didn't need to shout. I didn't need to fight. The evidence was already in motion, unstoppable, weaving its way through legal channels and social networks alike. For the first time in years, I felt free. Outside the ballroom, the cool night air wrapped around me. I inhaled deeply, the sounds of chaos muffled by the closed doors behind me. My heels clicked against the pavement as I walked away, the weight of the past lifting with every step. It wasn't over, far from it. What happened inside was only the spark. The real fire, the trials, the investigations, the consequences was still ahead. But I was no longer afraid. I was ready. I looked up at the stars scattered across the sky and let a slow smile curve my lips. Because this wasn't the end of their cruelty, it was the beginning of their downfall. And the battle had only just begun. The trial moved faster than anyone expected. The recordings, the forged documents, the money trail, it was all laid out like a map of betrayal. The judge listened stone-faced as my lawyer presented each piece of evidence. My parents sat at the defense table, their once proud posture wilted. My sister tried to avoid my gaze, her designer dress a poor disguise for the panic in her eyes. When the verdict came, it felt almost unreal. The court declared the sale of my lake house void, the forgery undeniable. The property was restored to my name, and the investigation into fraud and conspiracy was officially launched. My father's business license was suspended pending inquiry. My mother, once celebrated in local circles as a pillar of the community, was stripped of her positions on charity boards. My sister, whose wedding had been broadcast across social media, became the subject of gossip and ridicule, her fairy tale image shattered in public. Justice had spoken, clean and sharp. I should have felt triumphant. I should have felt whole. But as the gavel fell and the court adjourned, a strange emptiness spread through me. I walked out with the deed in my hands, my name restored, yet inside something was broken that no legal document could repair. Because justice is not the same as healing. I returned to the lake house, its wooden floors creaking in the silence. Dust had gathered in the corners, the windows smudged from months of neglect. I dropped the papers on the counter and leaned against the wall. For the first time since the nightmare began, the tears came. They poured out, hot and unrelenting, soaking my sleeves as I slid down to the floor. I wasn't crying for the house or the money. I was crying for the years I had wasted believing that love meant sacrifice. I cried for every 2 a.m. phone call, for every dollar I handed over without question, for every smile I forced through the weight of disappointment. The silence of the house amplified my sobs, wrapping me in grief I had carried far too long. I thought justice would erase the pain. Instead, it revealed the depth of it. For days, I wandered through the rooms, unable to shake the loneliness that clung to me. Friends called, leaving messages I didn't return. My phone buzzed with updates from the lawyer, but even victories felt hollow. Family was supposed to be the anchor in storms. Mine had been the storm itself. And now that it was gone, I floated untethered. One evening, Claire knocked on my door. When I didn't answer, she let herself in with the spare key I had given her years ago. She found me curled on the couch, surrounded by unopened mail. She didn't lecture. She didn't push. She just sat beside me, her hand resting lightly on mine. "You're not alone, Em," she said softly. "You've never been alone, not really." Her words sank into me like sunlight breaking through clouds. Later, the financial advisor who had helped me trace the stolen money stopped by with coffee. He told me he admired my resilience, how I had turned betrayal into action. And Aunt Margaret called, her voice firm as she promised she would stand by me, no matter what my mother said. Slowly, I began to see it. Family wasn't just the people who shared my blood. It was the people who stood beside me when the world fell apart, the ones who chose me without obligation. One night, as I stood on the deck overlooking the lake, the water calm beneath the stars, I realized I had a choice. I could remain trapped in bitterness, or I could rebuild, not just my house, but my life. I took a deep breath, letting the night air fill my lungs, and for the first time, I felt something shift inside me. This wasn't the end, it was the beginning. I wiped the last of my tears, turned toward the house, and whispered to myself, I know where to start again. The first real act of freedom was silence. I blocked their numbers, deleted their emails, and told the lawyer to handle all remaining communication. For years, I had answered every call, no matter the hour. Now there was nothing but peace, no late-night demands, no guilt-soaked messages. no manipulations masquerading as love. The quiet was terrifying at first, like stepping into a void, but soon it became the sound of liberation. With the noise gone, I turned to rebuilding what they had tried to strip from me. My finances, once drained by endless emergencies, were now mine to protect. I worked with my advisor to restructure my savings, redirecting money into investments that grew steadily rather than vanished into someone else's debts. For the first time, my bank account reflected my effort instead of my family's consumption. Work, too, became more than survival. I threw myself into projects I had once postponed, confident now that my energy wouldn't be siphoned away. Opportunities opened, promotions, collaborations, even speaking engagements. People admired the strength they saw in me, though they didn't know the battles I had fought to earn it. I smiled when colleagues called me resilient, but inside I knew it wasn't resilience. It was rebirth. One evening, sitting on the deck of the lake house, I felt the old ache stir again. This house had been taken from me, mocked as a wedding present, nearly erased from my life. And yet here it was, steady and still, waiting for me. I traced my hand along the wooden rail, imagining what this place could become. I didn't just want to survive, I wanted to transform. That thought grew into something larger. Slowly, I began inviting others into the space, friends, colleagues, even strangers I met online, who had endured toxic families like mine. At first, we gathered informally, sharing stories over coffee, our voices shaky but real. Then it became more organized, workshops, support groups, weekends dedicated to healing. I watched women sit where I had once cried, their shoulders trembling as they told their own tales of betrayal. I saw the relief on their faces when they realized they weren't alone, when they heard me say, I believed them too. I thought sacrifice was love, but we are allowed to choose ourselves. The lake house, once a symbol of loss, became a sanctuary of empowerment. We planted gardens together, painted the walls, filled the rooms with laughter that wasn't laced with cruelty. Each weekend, as more people arrived, the space seemed to breathe with new life. One day, as I stood before a group during a workshop, I told them the story I had once been too ashamed to admit. I recounted the forged documents, the cruel laughter, the champagne toast to my humiliation. Their eyes widened, some with anger, some with tears. And then I told them how I fought back, not with violence, but with truth, with patience, with strategy. I told them how justice had been served, but more importantly, how healing had begun. The applause that followed wasn't loud, but it was steady, a rhythm that reached my bones. In their faces, I saw reflections of my own journey. In their stories, I saw reminders that survival could turn into strength, that betrayal could be the soil where resilience bloomed. Standing there, I realized I had become something more than the daughter they tried to erase. I was no longer a victim. I wasn't even just a survivor. I was a guide, a voice, a reminder that we can rise even from the cruelest ashes. As the sun set over the water, painting the sky in shades of fire and gold, I felt an overwhelming surge of gratitude, not for what they did to me, but for what I had chosen to do with it. My family had taken so much, but they had failed to take the most important thing, my ability to rebuild. I closed my eyes, breathing in the cool air, and felt a sense of calm settle over me. This wasn't the ending of a story, it was the beginning of an entirely new one. I was not the cold avenger they might imagine, not a warrior consumed by bitterness. I was a woman reborn, strong because I had been broken, compassionate because I knew the weight of cruelty. And as I looked around at the community I had built, at the women and men finding their voices in the echo of mine, I knew one truth with absolute certainty. I hadn't just survived, I had learned how to thrive,